Welcome in the arena. My name's Allyson Klein, and today it's a data insights episode, which means I'm joined by Jeniece Wnorowski. Hey, Jeniece, how you doing?
Hi, Allison. Good as always. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Why don't you tell me? I'm really excited about today's episode. Why don't you tell me why we're here and who you brought with you?
Yeah, me too. We keep this series tightly to all things AI, but it's rare that we get a vertical focus. So today we're going to dive into healthcare and how Corti, and we have Nick Frahm from Corti, who is the platform engineer, who's going to talk us through the innovation that they're bringing to AI specifically for the healthcare space. So welcome to the program, Nick.
Thank you so much for having me. Nice to be here. I'm actually not from a software engineering background, strictly speaking, but I'm a mechatronics engineer by education, so a little bit more mix of hardware, electrical engineering, but I finally specialized in embedded systems engineering, and working now a lot with GPUs and hardware kind of comes in very handy. I lead a team of about 12 people here at Corti, and we do all things infrastructure. So where you see traditional platform teams working a little bit more on the developer experience side of things, we cover the entire stack from the metal that runs the models at the end of the day to the experience of our ML engineers getting their models live and providing good experience to our customers.
Now, Corti was founded in 2016, and healthcare is one of the most complex environments to build in, for sure. There's so much to navigate there. What was the original target that the company had aimed at to solve, and how has that shaped what you've built today?
Yeah, so originally we started in call recording and emergency call centers, 911. Latency is absolutely critical there, so real time at heart. So low latency is absolutely something that we've done for a long time. And then over time, we've discovered that like the stuff that we really excel at is the infrastructure. So can we open up that platform to people that build healthcare applications, different types of healthcare applications? And within that context, we've developed 4 verticals. So we have the medical grade speech recognition, which focuses on medical term recall and low word error rate. Then we have the text generation part, generating SOAP notes is the classic example, but it can do way more than that. We also have an agentic framework, which then can do things, for example, like drug-to-drug interactions fully autonomously, rather than just doing a simple database lookup. It's a lot more exciting than that. And this is just one of the examples that you can build with this. And then we have the medical coding, where we have recently launched something called Code Like Humans, where we use agentic AI to do ICD-10 coding, for example.
Nice.
Wow. And, Corti also does the foundational work, right? That enables others to move faster, build infrastructure layer. You guys build the infrastructure layer beneath the application layer. What's your thought on how you guys are built?
So, I mean, the nice thing is that when you build on top of us, you don't necessarily need to have your own ML team, right? You don't need to invest in all that training, all that expensive hardware. So we do that for you. And it allows you to run much, much faster and get much, much better time to market. So the nice thing here is that, like, for me personally, the jobs that I've worked in, they've always had a very intense mission of like doing something that generally contributes to society. And with Corti, we absolutely have that, right? Like, doctors are massively overloaded, and we have the ability here to really do something to reduce the load on doctors and help them spend time where it's meaningful with the patients.
Now, when you think about healthcare, you think about words like compliance, regulations, the need for precision, and lack of errors because the stakes are so high. When you think about all of these things in terms of AI's application in healthcare, how has the Corti team really approached this to the solutions that you're delivering to market?
I think some people, they look at compliance and they see it as friction. I like to see it very, very differently. So I see compliance as a way to give you a mandate to build things securely and to make sure that you build it at a high quality. The stuff that we built, we specifically had to optimize for SOC 2, for ISO 27001, HIPAA, and it it gives you a mandate to do these things at a quality where it helps you just be more effective in the things that you deliver. And I think that's really cool. So it's compliance by design and secure by design. That's what really kind of makes the difference, right? If you bolt it on later and it's not part of your natural process of developing those models, then it becomes very, very hard. But if that's part of how you work naturally, then it really makes all the difference.
So Nick, you guys are tackling some of the hardest problems in healthcare while also trying to make sense of those capabilities more accessible. What principles guide what you choose to build?
So we're a research lab, right? So it's important to us that we do frontier research and that we focus on doing something that sets us apart from the rest of the market. Like, we could give you access to just an OpenAI compatible endpoint, right? But that wouldn't really add value to a doctor that wants to generate a SOAP note or that wants to generate other types of documents, because what you get out is unstructured text. It doesn't really help you make a difference for the patient. You might want to extract vitals, blood pressure, and these kind of things. And getting those right requires that you have structured data. So our approach is very much domain focused, and that's what makes the difference. Whereas people say it's a $1 billion market, $1 trillion market with AI, right? But in reality, it's a lot of small segmented market that are $1 billion, $100 billion each. And it's very important for us that we focus on the market because that's what sets us apart.
Now, Nicklas, you lead platform engineering, and that goes from anything to managing the cloud stack, implementing observability across the infrastructure, and really thinking about how you're scaling infrastructure. I'm really interested in this because we've been talking about cloud computing and we've been talking about data center operations for a long time. But what I really am interested in is, how do the AI workloads change how you manage infrastructure at scale, especially in healthcare environments? Are there specific things that you found as you've been implementing technology that you need to keep your eyes on?
Yeah, it's the compliance dimension again. So what we've built is our own Kubernetes engine. And most of the time when you start talking about that, people ask you, why would you go through all that pain? And we have multiple examples of why we would want to do that. Some of it has geopolitical reasons, unfortunately. But those are not necessarily that exciting in this particular context. But we also have customers, for example, in Switzerland, that require that there's no external access to their systems. So in that scenario, we need a stack that is similar to what we run in our SaaS environment in production, but that under the hood feels very similar to somebody operating that environment. And now what we decided is we build a Kubernetes engine that relies on some of the primitives that exist in the industry already, namely Cluster API and Talos Linux. Both are optimized for security, reusability, and adaptability. And the difference there is that we have the ability to just change the substrate underneath. So we started with the thesis of, if we can solve compute, be that GPU compute or general purpose compute, then later we can also add storage on top and add a lot more capabilities. So we went live with these new inference clusters on top of our new Kubernetes engine in mid of February, I think. And then we'll soon launch a sovereign environment also, where we're completely decoupled from hyperscalers by using these abstractions. And the compliance part there is interesting because when you use Cluster API out of the box, right, there's providers, there's drivers, if you will, that you can use today, but they're they're a little bit toys. So they use public IPs, right? So that wouldn't fulfill the requirements of ISO 27001, where you need network segmentation. And there's a bunch of other things where it was just not built to work in a highly secure fashion where these requirements are fulfilled. So we've actually contributed upstream as well to some of the providers and partners that we work with, like, for example, Scaleway, where we've contributed back and said, okay, we need this particular feature. And sometimes you then get fun problems to solve, like how do you elect a leader in a network that you don't have access to? And then we developed a little component that does that automatically, where they discover each other and then one of them elects itself. And that's quite fun. So you get to solve really interesting engineering problems along the way. And you also stay at the edge of tech because you really push the boundary, the frontier there.
So you've evolved your inference stack from custom-built services to more cloud-native approaches. What drove the transition, and how did it change in terms of overall performance and flexibility?
So the additional flexibility is that we now have also a lot of negotiating power, right? When we talk capacity across different providers, right? We're not locked into, like previously we used a lot of Azure and we still do, but that is a lot easier now because we can say, okay, at this provider, we get a completely different price for this particular type of hardware, and allows us to just switch that over. Like it's a twofold thing. Like part of it is the technical implementation, but then also like some of the general like architecture that we've changed, where we have some of the more stateful workloads in something that we call application clusters. And then we have these inference clusters, which are just specialized for GPU workloads. And when we talk about performance and these kind of things, it's interesting because people sometimes, like, they're called large language models, but people often underestimate how long it takes to pull 60 gigabytes, 600 gigabytes, a terabyte worth of weights. Like you can easily saturate a couple of network interfaces with that. And like the amount of data that you just pull through, just getting it up and running, it's quite remarkable. So it's quite an interesting engineering challenge there as well.
Now, Nicklas, you just said the word sovereign, and I'm surprised the screen didn't blow up because it is a buzzword for 2026. Can you just back up a little bit and talk about, especially in Europe, why sovereign implementation is so important and how that aligns with geopolitical requirements as well as just requirements that might be present in the healthcare industry?
Yeah, I mean, we can start even just with the distribution of capacity, right? I think last time I looked at the numbers, the US owns 70% of all GPUs in the entire world, right? I don't know what the share of Europe there is, but this is just to kind of show, like, if you manage to turn all of this compute into actual intelligence, right? There is a bit of an arms race going on. What's very important is, I think, from a sovereignty perspective, there's different angles. So I think being sovereign also means that you own your technology stack. This is why we decided to not, for example, just buy something, but we're actively developing it. We're not just users of technology, users of Kubernetes, but we're actually using the underlying code. We understand the Kubernetes code, how it works internally, to build our own tooling, because that gives us an understanding that then makes us less dependent on some of these complicated politics. And in terms of sovereignty, there is the dimension, like Cloud Act is unfortunately a thing. And a lot of the customers that we serve in Europe, they've seen too many bad examples of the Cloud Act being abused. And that's where they're just not comfortable running on an environment where they require to trust another country. It's these unfortunate geopolitical situations where for a long time we've been allies, and we love the US. We have a US region. But we also need to be aware of our European customers, and like part of it is business continuity, but part of it is also like, this is what really sets us apart. We can play in different markets. We can play in Germany, which has C5. We can play in France, which has HDS, right? The complexity there comes from the different regulatory frameworks. But the ability to be able to shift your compute wherever, that's kind of what gives you this leverage. And that requires some of these like more complicated engineering problems that you need to solve.
Yeah. There's continuing, increasing pressure around data sovereignty and where workloads run. How does that factor into your architecture and partner decisions?
This is one of the reasons why we chose Scaleway as a partner, because they are also looking at expanding into the US. This does not mean that we'll never use Microsoft again, and we do still use them. They're still a very big company, still a very good partner. But at the end of the day, we look at where does the market go within Europe, and what does the market want? And the market currently doesn't feel a lot of confidence in those partners. But there is partners in Europe that are also expanding into the American room, and Scaleway is one of them, which is why we chose them as a strategic partner.
We love Scaleway on TechArena. We caught up with them at OCP Europe and had a fantastic conversation about what they're building and how vibrant and vital that is for the European sector. And I can't wait to see how they expand their business. It's so interesting, Nicklas, to hear your perspective on why they're such a great partner for you. I think that one thing that I have noted about Corti is that you're really contributing to the open source community while you're developing your own solutions. And I want to just turn to that for a second. How do you prioritize what to invest in from an internal standpoint and what to take into the community?
It's a good question. I think if something can be reused and there's a value generally where it's so generic that it would make sense and where there's a market demand, then it makes sense to open source it when it's not necessarily, let's say, core business. Like, yes, we do have a Kubernetes engine that allows you to run in different environments, but like somebody's not going to outrun us in the market just because they have access to this tech. There's a lot more to that, right? The Kubernetes engine doesn't include the entire inference stack. It doesn't include all the models. It doesn't include a lot of the like other tooling and stuff that you need on top, like storage and additional networking and routing and all of these other technical intricacies. And this is kind of like what sets us apart, that we don't only build like the compute foundation that you can get it available for free. And this is, so a lot of the software engineering that I've learned out in the open by reading code on GitHub and playing around with things. I have a couple of servers at home that I mess around with on a regular basis. And like, it's a way for us to also give back a lot to the community, because there is tools that we use on a day-to-day basis that are also open source. Like one of the notable ones is Envoy. We use Envoy very, very heavily. It's a great project. And this is kind of like, we see it as a little bit also as like social responsibility, right? You can't just be a user, you also kind of need to contribute back.
Yeah. So looking ahead as AI becomes embedded in healthcare systems, how do you see infrastructure layer kind of evolving, and where does Corti really want to lead?
We want to lead within healthcare, but in general also within accessibility of AI. Because again, that goes back to like, what is the interface that we provide, right? Sometimes we have customers asking, okay, but your API doesn't behave like the OpenAI API. And that's on purpose, right? Because you do want low latency streaming, you do want real-time feedback, and you want to get features like, for example, when I do a conversation with my patient, I want to get real-time feedback on, is the audio being captured, and these kind of things. And these features you don't get out of just general purpose speech recognition models out there in the market.
Now, I just have one more question for you. I think about AI in healthcare as kind of in its early innings, at early stages. Sorry for the baseball reference, very American of me. But what still needs to be solved to make it truly scalable, reliable, and broadly deployable? And what is your team working on in terms of those priorities?
So right now we're primarily focusing on coverage in terms of like providers, because that gives us a lot of negotiation power. But also we're exploring some other product avenues to see if there's a way where we can add value in different ways to our customers.
Well, speaking of that, I know listeners are going to want to learn more. So with that, Nicklas, where can everyone go to connect with you and or just learn more about Corti?
Yes, so always head over to docs.corti.ai. Alternatively, you can have a look at our beautiful website at corti.ai. Shout out to our designer, Maxwell and Elle, that do a tremendous job there. Otherwise, we do also have some podcasts there. We do have a builder series where we dive a little bit deeper also into commodity. This should also be on our website. Otherwise, you can head over to commodity.io, which is just forwarding and redirecting to our GitHub repo where we build commodity.
Nicklas, thank you so much for being on the program today. It was so delightful to learn more about what you and the Corti team are doing. And keep it up. We can't wait to hear more. We'd love to have you back on the show sometime.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Nicklas. Thank you, Allyson.